Oh, hello, my name's Norma Vondee, and today I'm not going to talk so much about my mosaics. I've only used a small selection of them, but what I'm talking about is how to keep it creative. And so the things that you need to set up a creative situation is space, time, attitude, you need your sources, and you need the interaction. Now, an application of this would be, this is the Royal Academy, Anish Kapoor, and his beautiful, wonderful sculpture, and then cross that with a school in Milton Keynes that doesn't have a very big budget, but wants something beautiful and uplifting. So the idea travels across. Now, they don't just, I didn't do a list on purpose because these elements don't just go down like a list. They follow each other round. One will come forward and interact with another, but they do all need to be there. And I feel I can talk about this because I've been through the art college experience from start to finish. I started as an immigrant child. My father and mother emigrated with our family to America when I was 5 from Dublin. So I'd lived in Dublin quite happily with my crazy family. And then suddenly, from the grey, drizzly atmosphere, I was in a place that was so bright. And there were people of all different colours. And these big cars I'd never seen in supermarkets. And it was just a complete culture smack in the face. And when people say to me, where do you get the nerve from to do the things that you do? And I say, because when I was 5, I became aware of the fact that anything was possible. The light could change, people could change, anything is possible. Now, I learned the rules from Elaine Goodwin. She set up this organization, and she was a great inspiration to me. And when I teach my students, I generally start with the Andamento, and then if they want to, they can go off into doing something more loose. But we start in a very structured way. And this is something that one of my students did and then brought back to me the next day. He'd started with the black and white, he'd followed the Andamento, he'd gone home and put the color in. And if somehow I had managed to elicit a creative response in him towards that, I didn't care if he broke the rules. The rule in the end is be creative. When I first started doing mosaics, I did it because I liked it so much and I wanted it for myself. I live in Wapping, and this was a black and white map. The front color was black and the background was white, and I reversed it. And these little dolphins here are one of my favorite motifs. The boat just came straight from a photocopy, and the chain I made up as I went along. And I thought, well, I've put these dolphins in, and there's never dolphins in the Thames. And then 2 years ago, 5 dolphins swam up the Thames. And I was lucky enough to go to art college. I came back here to Great Britain when I was 17 and reckless. And I went to art college, and I still remain friends with some of the people I was at art college with. And occasionally, with great joy, I do jobs with them. And this is 2 designers that I worked with, Marion and Andrew Roberts. And they did the design and I just did the mosaicing. But it's great fun, and it's lovely because working with other people really stretches you. And I seem to be drawn, as I get older, more and more and more and more to black. I love black. And I'm a terrible groupie. I was a groupie for Elaine, I was a groupie for the Romans, then I was a groupie for the Greeks, and now I'm a Matisse groupie. I went down to the south of France and I stayed in Nice because, again, I'm old now and I can do what I please. Not madly, but I can do it. And I stayed in this hotel called the Hotel Suisse. And as I passed my passport over the desk, the concierge said to me, there's a lot of Irish people stay here. And I said, oh, we're a very small thing. It must be, wonder what attracts them. And I went outside and my knees buckled under me because there was a blue plaque. And the plaque said, this is where James Joyce stayed when he wrote part of one of his books. And of course, James Joyce, if you went to the Diaghilev exhibition at the V&A a few years ago, James Joyce was commissioned, he commissioned Matisse to do illustrations for his books. So this piece is about some little yellow saucepans and a sieve I bought at Uniprix. And I have doctored it since. My son said to me, he said, Mum, if you're going to charge money for these pictures, they have to look smooth for rich people. And I said, but I wanted it rugged. And he said, no, you'll have to fill the lines in. So I always listen because, and so I have since filled in the grouting of the background. I originally trained at Ravensbourne in industrial design, 3D design. So I started out as a designer. So I know the rationale of design, the process from learning about how you assess the market, how you go through the sketching process. After years of pleasing the little nuns that educated me, and I could draw for them and paint for them, and drawing was my way of keeping them off my back, really. I went to art college, and because I didn't draw like an engineer, I was told I couldn't draw. So it's all a little education. So from the design school, I went into a PGCE, and then I went into education. I was a teacher for 20 years. And then I broke loose and had a child at 40 and got on an MA course. And one of the things about the MA course, actually the three best things that I learned from the MA course was, first of all, they wouldn't let you do it unless you had your own space. So I had to go and find a studio. And I financed it by renting out one of the rooms in my flat. And then the second thing was, one day I was having a tutorial with my wonderful tutor who used to let me make sure I always had my tutorials early so I could go and pick my son up from school. Women have been really, really helpful to me in my career. I was talking about Elaine this and Elaine that, and she looked at me and she said, we're here to discuss your work. Can we do that, please? And it was like, oh my God. So she opened that window for me. The third thing was, when you're submitting for projects, the first thing that they look at is the size of the budget of the last project. And the MA I did was with the School of Architecture in University of East London. And I learned then that architects don't really like artists. It was a great shock. In fact, I'm always learning things. Now, when I was at the studio, I started to do softer, more abstract things. And this is a scene from West Bay in Dorset. Some of the little rocks there are actually from the beach. And it was lying on the beach, looking sideways. I made it into a triptych. And one of the artists next door, because having a studio is a great burden, and it can be a real pain, and the other artists can be a real pain. But in creativity, there's always a lot of dichotomies. They can also be a great joy. And because I was a teacher for so long, I'm actually allergic to critique. Well, if you go in 7 times a day with a set lesson and you have set results to come out of, you become bored with it. And I'd have a 10-year-old child who was raised halfway across the world and drew like an angel in her own fashion. And I had to mark her according to a load of European standards. It was ridiculous. So I don't very often take advice from other people in a professional sense, but I do in a personal sense. And so one of the artists next door, when I was doing this, a boat builder, said, oh, West Bay, yeah, where's the boats? And I thought, oh yeah, there's no boats. That's right. So I put the little boats in up above there in the bay, and I put some little boats down here. And it just made the whole difference to the thing. It made just a little bit jollier. And there they are. That's it ungrouted. And then it got grouted. This is I still go on courses. I still do courses. I go to Orsoni's, and I've been on courses with most of the artists here. And at the moment, I'm doing a course in Morley, and I went to West Dean this summer. So it's a great joy to be a student. But this was about a step in Venice in Orsoni's. These are some of my clients. They have wonderful swish. They do these incredible developments to their houses. You know, they make all these clean spaces, and they clean the whole, it's like a desert, you know, when you walk in. And they say, when they've got it all down, they think, oh my God, it's like living in a department store. So they pay me to do these things, and I go and look at their stuff and make stuff. They said they wanted a Klimt, and I said, no, you can only have a Vondee. But I take elements of what they have and put it together. The other real joy, and I didn't realize it until this year, is doing public work, you know, and impossible things. You know, the bigger the challenge, the better. Great. And this was an area that had a lot of social agitation in it. And it was an area that was being kicked to death. And any art that goes up has to be really vulnerable, really invulnerable. But I always leave my public pieces just a little bit unfinished looking, a little bit raw looking, because I've discovered over the years, people are less likely to muck about with something that's got that tiny little bit of an edge to it, you know? They don't want to cut themselves and they're not sure, you know? Anyway, this ended up being a green man. So it's a long green man, and it was made using all the techniques I'd learned with Elaine, Andamento, the way things go. So the lines here on the head, here, were drawn in about 5 seconds. And then everybody was given one of these to do. Now this is a particular tidy person, but we must have had 30 different kinds of green there. And they all chose, because I try to recreate within the situation something a bit more creative, so they can really do whatever they want with the leaves. Some people go mad, and people who hate it can do other things. And because the thing is so vast and the whole thing is so loose, if someone wants to sit and draw a fox or a rabbit, they can do that. And if they get fed up doing it, someone else will come and fill it in. And there's a lovely happy feel and open feel about that. But I'm a complete tartar about health and safety, ex-teacher, and I have to be careful not to make that come too far to the front. So this little girl's finishing her brother's fox, and this girl did all those big squares on there. So it's traditional but raw, right on the streets. I started making sculptures because I couldn't help myself. And I live in East London, by the docks. So a lot of people had these little gardens. There was no hope of having a water feature in. So this garden I represented water in a really urban setting. And I've done quite a lot of work about that because it interests me. And so this was my studio, where my studio was, right freezing in the winter, but fabulous, really open. Trinity Wharf, it's just opposite the Dome. I was there for 11 years. And I did work about the water, because we sat and stared at the water a lot. And this was a night scene for there, because you'd work all hours. I was really lucky to be able to do that. And this is a piece I made at Orsoni's, because I went to Orsoni's 4 or 5 times. God, they've had to put up with me. It's terrible, because I arrived exhausted. And I'd never used a hammer and hardy. And Mr. Orsoni was hacking away at it, and he said, Norma, you must be more friendly with the dogs. But I'm sure they thought I was quite a barbarian, but you know. We all bring what we want. The little hearts at the bottom are all our hearts, our little creative hearts. And these look like monstrances. Of course, being brought up an Irish Catholic, the iconography of Catholicism runs through me like words through rock candy, you know. And so I can't help but do that. And I've stopped fighting it now. And making public things happy. This is a Swiss cottage school. And these ladies here at the front are from the American Junior League. I don't know if you know of the Junior League, but they're sort of a typical Junior League person has an MBA from Harvard, and she's over here while her husband develops his career. So we had these situations where I was going into school funded by them, and we'd have one helper for each child. You know. Well, I knew what schools were. I knew how it could be. They said, what do you want? I said, I want this much money. Fine. What else do you want? I said, I want you all, I want one child for each person. I want you to, and they turn up looking smart, lovely, really clever. But it was always the kids that were the most creative, you know. And that was a happy day. Now, when we did our MA, we had to have a show. And I started doing bigger sculpture then. And I was happy with it. And what I was doing, I was making shapes and then working on metal shapes. And then I was putting the tiles on mesh and I was draping them on, you know. And, you know, people always say to me, oh, you know, you can make it in a mold and it's smooth. I said, yes, I know I can do that. I want it to look like hands have touched it. I want it to look like it's vulnerable, it's trembling, you know. So the ancient thing of Indian wings or, what's his name, wings. My mother, God love her, who thought I was doing a degree in painting when I was doing my industrial design degree, saw this photograph of me and said, Norma, what have you got on your feet? So you're pretty sure that your family and friends are not going to support you in your creative journey because they're worried for you. Yes, we've all been there, I know. This is me in my studio, and lovely things like blocks and tackles, lifting weights. And I made an alliance with a wonderful person who did all my ironwork, which was a great luxury. But that all was made by quite small children. Again, sticking to the Andamento, and then it went up on, that's St. Michael. It's not a great picture, but there we are. Whenever I do a project, because I'm always trying to come back to that creative circle, where you give yourself the space, you give yourself the time, and you give yourself the attitude, the optimistic attitude. You have to budget in that empty space where you're either going to explore materials or go off and do a course and whatever. And you have to over budget for it. So luckily, this is the first time I went to Sony's. I made a Seahorse and it was great. But I came home and I hung it up in my studio, and 3 days later, one of the Docklands people came around and said, I want that, and bought it. And it paid for the whole trip, you know, which is nice, but you have to do it for that to happen. You know, you can't plan that. The money, Damien Hirst said, you always take the money to the art. You never take the art to the money. So because I'd been a teacher in East London, I had a lot of connections. And this is a school that I used to teach in. Again, I've met some incredible headmistresses. The last two headmistresses I worked for both got OBEs, and this one got the Order of St. Gregory as well. She built 56 million aluminium school. The church didn't want it, the people in the local neighborhood didn't want it, the local authority didn't want it. She did it, and then she spent lots of money putting mosaics in there. And I said, what do you want? She said, I just want it to be beautiful. And I knew these kids, and I knew what was needed. And what was needed was a soft voice. There's something that would match the elegance and the lightness of the building. And they designed every bit of it. And the only thing I did, I was going through a Japanese phase at the time. So everything was toned down. It was all very zen. But it worked, because schools are quite nasty places for secondary school kids. And they drew whatever they wanted in the color range that they were doing. And then with the sixth form, we took them off on a boat trip up and down the river, and they did this. And Bruno Pulsatari out there, who does Eurotips, he laid it all. So I could just work on the making and managing my helpers, my other employees, and the kids, and he did all the assembly. And we grouted it, adhered it and grouted it in resin grout. So that bench for the last 15 years has had really dynamic children jumping up and down on it for all those years, and it still looks great. So this is one of the staircases. You can get the feeling of the building. And this was a warm-up for the sixth form. And we made this in a day with mirror and tile. Just whack, whack, whack. And they went off and did their drawings of guns and tattoos and everything. And we had some very interesting discussions about what actually the building was going to be about. But and then there was a big sign outside done on, I discovered that you can phone up companies and say, I need a great big metal sign, and they'll say, fine, send you the template. So we send them a template, they give you a price, they deliver the metal, and then they come and put it up. It's fabulous, it's great. Sadly by then I had had some hip operations, so I was on crutches, and I wasn't allowed up the scaffolding. That was really annoying. So the workmen had to fill in the right colors and, do the attaching things. I think they were collecting together a fund to have me put away at the end of that. Now, when things go well, people want more of it. So the head teacher came and said, Mrs. Vondee, I want you to work with the fourth years, and I want you to do a mosaic dedicated to the Sisters of Mercy who set up this school. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? Because I respected them, but I'd had my teenage rebellious years fighting against all that. And here I am being asked as an artist to then do something that honors them. But I got around it because one of my helpers was the sound recordist for the BBC, Deborah Pittman. And she went and did an oral history with them. 2 days paying her from the job. And then she came back and we played their voices to the children they'd been working with. And the children did the drawings. And then we put it together in stages like this. The qualities of mercy, the jobs that they do. Burying the dead, looking after the sick, educating children. And I didn't know how to put it all together, so I went to Torcello and looked at this and decided to use this format because I'm a shameless lifter, as all artists are. And we ended up with this, which is the Mercy Wall. And so we have the nuns at the top here going along, and we have their caring for the sick and the dead. And this is visiting prisoners. This is Twice Blessed, the quality of mercy from The Merchant of Venice. This is educating children. And this was supposed to be about washing the clothes, because they did that. They used to have the kids coming, because I've seen it myself as in a London teacher, little children coming in with black cuts, and smelly and whatever. So God love them, they washed their clothes and hung them up. It wasn't all the Magdalen laundries. And I thought I'd put that in as a little sly remark. And of course, I didn't read the architect's thing properly, and it ended up that was nearly concealed.
How big is the wall?
Oh, it's really big, isn't it, Bruno? Yeah, you hated that one. It was big and it was really bumpy. It's 2 stories high and maybe 8 foot wide. You can still see it. That's Twice Blessed. because the quality of mercy is blessing you twice. And also, it just so happened at Sony's that they were doing a big thing about all this water running through stuff. That helped. And again, because I had a design background, it's easy for me to make structures. But I find them less and less appealing because you always go to sleep at night wondering if they're going to drop over. And no matter how many tons of cement, there's always that worry. So I've lost that desire to do bigger and bigger and bigger. I just want to do divine. This was the studio. Now, again, I sound like the PR woman for BAMM. I made these. All the time I'm doing the schoolwork, I'm always doing work of my own in the evening. And these were for an exhibition in Lichfield Cathedral. They were based on the 4 Evangelists, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And the textures represent the different evangelists. And this was one of my helpers. He was in my first class whenever I taught, and he adopted me. And he could do every job that I could do better, but I was the one that put them together. And that's then in Lichfield Cathedral. And the wings were based on the eyes. I think they're called Episcopy. It's a really, the iconography goes back past the Greeks to Neolithic times, of the eye that watches you as you go in and out of life. And that's one of the eyes put in an abstract fashion on the thing. And I always said if they didn't sell, I was going to have them on the 4 corners of my bed, like Sarah Bernhardt, you know. But that hasn't happened. And again, this was for another BAMM miniatures exhibition, where I just love it. I love arts and crafts. And the phoenix was my constant thing. After you've had illness, you really want to represent yourself as being resurrected. And I love, day books, night and day. This one's grouted with pink grout. I'm not sure about it. Anyway, never mind. Yes. So after I had a second lot of surgery, I couldn't make sculpture anymore, okay? It just wasn't an option because the desire to pick stuff up never goes away. So I thought, well, I can't make a big sculpture anymore, but I can do a little egg. So in the Evening Standard, there was a thing saying, the big egg hunt. And I'd seen the elephants around London all decorated, and I thought, oh yeah, well, that would be actually a good bit of fun. So I'll do that. And I did. And they were Fabergé eggs. And, I work in the poorest schools, and I work with the richest clients. And I love having both of those things, because it's all part of that creative circle. One of them pays for the time, another one stimulates you. Rich people won't let you do crazy things in their houses very often, but often schools will let you do that, and you kind of do the better work for it. So I like to play that, that's my playing of it. And this I knew would flatter the clients and be a successful thing, and I got to see it auctioned off, and it was really lovely, because we were very underestimated. The second year, with the eggs, we had to do masks. It was another piece of decadent flummery. So I'd made this box based on a turquoise skull, and I was making some masks for a ball. That was the theme of the ball. And is Hannah Griffiths here? There you are, Hannah. Hannah was an owl, and I was a Mexican serpent. And we're only practicing them. They were auctioned off as tickets. And then Liz and I went along to the garden party at Clarence's house. And the first person we met was the treasurer over there who volunteered. So there's a thread going through this, that people who volunteer and step up to have a good time often step up to do work within organizations like this. And then the next day I'm back in an East London school, and I'm facing the wall. So this is a 2-part thing. We'd done one the year before, and then this is the front gate of the school. The kids come across here, and people pee in the corner. So you've got to weave the magic and claim the space, so people don't want to do that. And so we ended up putting this up, which is very child-friendly and lovely, and people stopped peeing in the walls. It was great. We also planted plants along the bottom, and that worked very well. Well, I hope that's been enjoyable for you. This is the last piece. It's a piece I did for my metal worker. We never exchanged money. I always exchanged art for him. So he made a metal grid for a horrible drain he had in his garden. And him and his partner used to travel a lot and collected all different things. So I had to go and do a research trip in Thailand. And I discovered this is how little ponds look. This is how little gardens look. But the fish themselves are made from things like little plastic hippopotamuses and different bits. So there's all little bits of memory stuck in there. And again, it's resin on metal mesh. And then really durable, been there in the garden, banged over a lot. So I suppose the fragility of the emotions of them and the hardness of the material, that's my playground. That's what I like to do. And that's all.